From the time she was a toddler, with a halo of fiery red curls catching the first blush of dawn, Serenity was a creature of the morning. Her mother, Carol, would often recount how little Serenity, barely a year old, would wake before the rest of the house stirred. Instead of crying out for attention, this little sunbeam would pull herself up in her crib, her bright blue eyes fixed on her still sleeping parents, babbling her own cheerful greetings to the quiet room. It was this innate connection to the sunrise that earned her the cherished nickname Sunny, a name that seemed to perfectly capture her radiant spirit. Later, as Serenity grew, school mornings were never a struggle for Carol. While other mothers battled sleepy protests, Serenity would invariably be awake before her alarm clock even had a chance to chime, eager to greet the new day. Now, living on her own in the bustling city, that ingrained habit persisted. 6 a.m. found Serenity slipping out of bed with an ease that felt like second nature, the quiet hum of the pre-dawn streets, her familiar soundtrack as she drove to work. The sidewalks were sparsely dotted with early risers, a lone jogger, a dog walker lost in thought, and cars waiting at the stoplights could be counted on one hand. Though her commute was usually a swift 20-minute drive, Serenity had built in a significant buffer, a full hour and a half, because these early hours were her prime time for quality control. As an outdoor advertising specialist, Serenity's keen eye was responsible for ensuring that every billboard, banner, and transit advertisement met the exacting standards of their clients. She had a meticulous nature, a quiet pride in her work, and a deep understanding of the visual language that shaped the city's landscape. This morning, however, a knot of frustration tightened in her chest the moment her gaze landed on the very first billboard displaying their latest campaign. No, 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 she thought, her brow furrowing. I personally signed off the colour proof. They swore the green would be exactly as the client specified. This is an abomination. Serenity's expertise meant that even on weekends or during leisurely road trips, her eyes were constantly evaluating the print quality and design of every advertisement that lined the highways. It was an ingrained habit, a professional reflex that rarely took a day off. Pulling her reliable sedan over to the nearest legal parking spot, Serenity grabbed her phone, determined to document this discrepancy, to capture the wrong shade of green as accurately as possible. It took a few patient manoeuvres, shifting her stance and adjusting the angle, to ensure the photograph truly reflected the jarring difference from the approved proof. As she turned to head back to her car, a sudden, surreal moment unfolded before her eyes. It was as if time itself had slowed, the world moving in a distorted cinematic sequence. Another vehicle, a dark sedan, was hurtling directly towards her parked car. A split second hung in the air, thick with disbelief, before a muffled crunch jolted Serenity back to reality. "What in the world are you doing?" she exclaimed, her voice sharp with shock, as she rushed towards the scene of the accident. "Didn't you see where you were going?" she demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. The driver of the other car, a man with weary eyes and a slumped posture, nodded sadly. "I didn't. I had been driving for the whole night. I'm from another state. I'm so sorry," he admitted, his voice low. A wave of dismay washed over Serenity as she surveyed the mangled rear of her beloved car, a faithful companion on her early morning rounds. With a sigh that carried a hint of resignation, she reached for her phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the police. To her surprise, a cheerful officer arrived surprisingly quickly, his demeanour a stark contrast to the frustrating start of her day. He efficiently photographed the damage, filled out the necessary paperwork, and had them both sign the report. Serenity carefully scrutinized every line of the documents before putting pen to paper. "So you're not from around here?" she asked the apologetic driver. "No, ma'am," he replied. "Just passing through." "All right, here are your documents for the insurance company," the officer said, handing a couple of sheets to Serenity before turning to the other driver. "And, sir, you'll need to come with me." The man simply spread his hands in a gesture of weary acceptance. Serenity offered a brief farewell and turned the key in the ignition. Now, the faulty billboard and the client's potential displeasure had been replaced by a more immediate concern, the dented reality of her car and the logistical nightmare it presented. Being without her vehicle, even for the duration of the repairs, would severely impede her ability to do her job effectively. Maybe this is a sign, a rebellious little voice whispered in her mind. A perfect excuse for a vacation. I should suggest it to Jake. The thought, unexpected and slightly audacious, brought a small, fleeting smile to her lips. A couple of hours later, the earlier chaos somewhat contained, Serenity walked into her boss's office, a determined glint in her eyes. "Preston, we need to seriously reconsider our partnership with this vendor." A kind-faced man in his late 40s, Preston looked up from his paperwork, a warm smile gracing his features. "Well, good morning to you too, Serenity." "Oh yes, good morning. They sent us a colour proof, which we approved, with a specific note about the exact shade of green required by the client's brand book. And the result?" She gestured vaguely, her frustration resurfacing. "The result is that monstrosity I saw on the highway this morning." Serenity swiftly accessed the photo on her phone and presented it to Preston. "Maybe it's just a bad picture," he offered, a hint of defensiveness in his tone, ever the pragmatist. Serenity's eyes flashed with a spark of defiance. "Then come see for yourself, Preston. My gut tells me they probably ran a few of the billboards in the correct colour, strategically placing them closer to the city centre, while the ones on the outskirts are, well, this." She tapped the phone screen pointedly. "I told you it was too good to be true, their prices being so suspiciously low." Preston sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right. Maybe they had a slight oversight. Serenity, we'll just have them reprint them." "Of course," she retorted, her voice laced with impatience. "Only think of the time that will take. This isn't like printing a flyer for the break room wall. And believe me, the client will not be amused. In fact," she continued, her tone turning persuasive, "I really think we need to go back to our previous vendor. Yes, they're further away, but their quality is impeccable. The transportation costs, even with the distance, would still be less than reprinting this entire batch here, not to mention the potential penalties we'll have to pay the client." Serenity pressed her point a little further, her passion for quality evident, before finally returning to her own workspace, a quiet determination settling within her. She knew Preston wouldn't make an immediate decision. He was a thoughtful man who preferred to weigh all the angles. But Serenity had planted the seed, and she trusted that he would consider her arguments carefully. As she powered on her computer and went to pour herself a much-needed cup of coffee, the cheerful chime of her ringtone broke the relative quiet. "Hey, Sonny!" The screen flashed. The Sonny accompanied by a bright, smiling sun emoji. A warmth spread through Serenity's chest, and a small smile touched her lips as she called him. "Good morning to you too," she said. "You're up an atom, I see?" "Yep, already at the gym. Had my one-on-one training session until 10. Ugh, those early birds." Jake teased her good-naturedly. Serenity chuckled. "Early birds are the ones up at 6, sweetie. 10 o'clock is practically midday." "All right. I keep forgetting my fiancé is one of those rare morning creatures. How was the drive to the office? Any excitement?" Serenity hesitated for a fraction of a second before deciding to lay it all out. "Actually, there was a little too much excitement. I got into a car accident." "You what? Are you okay? What happened?" Jake's voice was instantly laced with concern. The playful tone vanished. "I'm fine, just a bit shaken up. Some, non-local driver decided to park his car after mine and slightly misjudged his speed, while I was photographing that lovely green billboard." "Seriously? That's what you get for being out at the crack of dawn?" Jake teased gently, a hint of his usual humour returning, though the underlying concern was still evident. "Don't worry about the car, it can be fixed. The important thing is that you're all right." "That's what I keep telling myself," Serenity sighed. "But it did give me an idea, actually. Something I wanted to discuss with you. What time will you be done at the club tonight?" "Same as always, around 10 p.m. "OK, then I'll meet you at the gym. I'm planning on heading over around 7:30. Since I didn't get to the office until 11, I'll have to stay late anyway." After speaking with Jake, Serenity's spirits considerably lifted. Settling into her chair, she dialed her insurance company, the earlier frustration slowly giving way to a sense of calm. Next, she opened her work email. The digital influx was a stark contrast to the quiet streets of just a few hours ago. The office was gradually filling with the low hum of computers, the murmur of conversations, and the insistent ringing of phones. Serenity had been the department head for a couple of years now, a significant climb from her starting position as an office manager assistant. She enjoyed the dynamic energy of the advertising world. It was a career path she hadn't even considered in her younger years, when dreams of being a journalist or a translator had filled her head. But now she felt a sense of belonging here. The work involved connecting with interesting people, visiting production sites, overseeing contracts, and even her knowledge of foreign languages proved invaluable with their international clients. A quiet sense of pride would swell within her every time she saw a beautifully executed campaign or a compelling video her colleagues had created, knowing she had played a part in bringing it to life. Of course, there were frustrating moments, like the billboard fiasco and the unexpected fender bender. Preston, the CEO, valued Serenity's drive for excellence and her knack for negotiation, which was why he had consistently promoted her, and Serenity, in turn, rewarded his faith with hard work and a genuine commitment to the agency's success. Serenity often spent long hours at the office, far beyond the official workday, but she rarely noticed the time slipping away. However, twice a week, she made a point of leaving precisely at 6 p.m, heading straight for the local fitness club. When she was 5, her parents had enrolled her in figure skating, hoping to channel her boundless energy. It was at Fit Zone that Serenity's path first intersected with Jake's. He was a strength training instructor, his sculpted physique a testament to his dedication, and he couldn't help but notice the vibrant splash of red hair that seemed to flit from one weight machine to another. "Hey there," he'd said, his voice a warm rumble that somehow managed to cut through the clang of weights. "I've seen you around a few times now. What are your fitness goals? Trying to bulk up?" A smile, bright and genuine, had lit up Serenity's face. "I'm not even sure what to call it," she had replied, her voice a little breathless but cheerful. "Good mood, mostly. I just love the feeling of pushing myself physically." Jake's eyes had swept over her toned figure, an appreciative but professional assessment. "I could definitely help you sculpt those muscles, give them more definition. I have a specialized routine designed specifically for women." Then he'd offered a casual, helpful suggestion. "Ask the girls at the front desk about my sessions." "OK," Serenity had nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I'll definitely ask." But a part of her, the fiercely independent part, hesitated to commit to a rigid schedule, fearing that the unpredictable demands of her job might interfere, so she decided to stick to her own routine for now. Their next encounter was in the steamy warmth of the sauna. "So," Jake had said, a playful grin on his face, "didn't my offer pique your interest?" "It did," Serenity had admitted, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "But the timing just doesn't work for me right now." Another guy might have taken offence, might have written Serenity offers uninterested. But Jake, with his easygoing nature, made a point of offering small snippets of advice whenever he saw her in the gym. Then one evening after her workout, as she was pulling out of the gym parking lot, she spotted him walking. "Need a ride?" she'd called out, slowing down beside him. During the short drive, Jake explained that he'd dropped his car off for maintenance near his work and hadn't had a chance to pick it up before his last client of the day had arrived. "So I figured I'd grab the bus home tonight and pick up my car tomorrow. And then you conveniently appeared." They'd chatted easily about their workouts, Serenity's work in advertising, the unpredictable weather, and Serenity had dropped Jake off right in front of his apartment building. Now, they had been living together for almost a year. Jake's schedule was the opposite of Serenity's. He got up around noon, arrived at the gym at 3 p.m, and worked there until 10 p.m. or later. Even on their days off, they often spent half the day apart, seemingly living in separate time zones, despite being in adjacent rooms. Gradually, however, their love had fostered a gentle compromise, a weaving together of their disparate rhythms. One of the first things that had amused Jake was Serenity's almost obsessive attention to billboards and advertisements. "I honestly don't even see them," he'd confessed one day. "My eyes have become so glazed over from the sheer volume of it all that if you asked me what billboard we just passed, I wouldn't have a clue." Part of Serenity felt a pang of disappointment that her work, her passion seemed invisible to the average person. But another part of her saw it as a challenge, a motivation, to find new and innovative ways to capture the attention of even the most jaded eyes. It was, in fact, Jake's casual observation that had sparked an idea, a new direction for her career, proposing digital displays to their clients, dynamic screens that were impossible to ignore. Due to the constant rotation of images, they stood out from the visual clutter. One evening, as Jake and Serenity strolled through the mall, his gaze snagged on a vibrant digital display, showcasing a local artist's work. "Now that's interesting," he'd commented, admiration in his voice. "Beautiful, and it catches your eye because it keeps changing. It's practically a TV screen. Not just a static piece of paper." Serenity had faced initial resistance from Preston, who was wary of the new technology and the upfront costs, but Serenity's persuasive arguments, coupled with the undeniable visual impact of the digital ads, eventually won them over. The results, of course, spoke for themselves: increased engagement and a modern, cutting-edge image for the client. Yet there was a snag. The city had a limited number of these digital displays, and most were concentrated downtown. The exciting potential of digital screens had to be shelved, at least for now, until the infrastructure caught up with the necessity. "Hey," Jake said, leaning in to give Serenity a quick kiss when they met at the gym that evening. "How's your mood? What did the insurance company say?" Serenity recounted the tedious process. 10 days for them to wade through all the paperwork, and then my car can go to the shop in about 3 weeks. Though they did warn me not to expect a quick turnaround since some of the parts will have to be ordered. "So how long do you think you'll be without your wheels?" Jake asked, concern etched on his face. "They estimated a couple of weeks, maybe a little longer." "Oh, that's still a pain," Jake acknowledged. Serenity's eyes lit up with a sudden idea. You know what I was thinking? Maybe we should use this as an excuse to get away for a little vacation. Preston actually offered me some time off. Said it would be good stress therapy. Jake's eyebrows rose. What about your work? Are you swamped right now? Not particularly, Serenity replied. I think I could probably arrange things. So where would we go? He asked, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. Somewhere we can completely disconnect from work and responsibilities, you know? Just recharge. It's still a while until summer. Maybe the beach? Serenity recognized the subtle downturn of his lips, the slight crinkle around his eyes. It was his "I'm not entirely thrilled with that suggestion" face. Why does it always have to be the beach? He countered gently. You'd think the earth had nothing else to offer. I think we can come up with something a little more interesting. Serenity decided that if Jake was serious about spending his vacation time with her, then the onus was on him to find a destination they would both enjoy. A few days later, he did have a plan. I've got it. My old college roommate just popped up. Well, I found him on social media, actually. He runs this little resort in the woods. Apparently it's all set up with cozy cabins and tons of outdoor activities. He swears we won't be bored. What do you think? His place is in the forests of Alaska. The snow won't even start melting up there for another month. Alaska? Serenity gasped, suddenly wide awake. Serenity, nicknamed Sunny since her bright-eyed, early-rising childhood, had always gravitated towards warmth. Winter in the city was a struggle for her, a season to be endured rather than enjoyed. The thought of venturing into a snowy forest somewhere in the far north sent a shiver down her spine, and not entirely from excitement. Yet Jake's genuine enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time in her life, she found herself with a backpack over her shoulders instead of wheeling a suitcase. When they finally disembarked at 6 a.m. at a desolate, snow-covered tiny airport, a wave of apprehension washed over Serenity. "Oh, my God, where have you brought me?" she whispered, her breath misting in the frigid air. "How are we even going to get out of here? There's no one around, only snow, and snow, and snow." But then, after what felt like an eternity of biting wind and Serenity's mounting unease, the profound silence of the surrounding woods was shattered by a sudden chorus of exuberant yelps and barking. Moments later, a dog sled, its path slicing through the pristine snow. The musher, a robust man with kind eyes and a ruddy complexion, shouted a cheerful greeting, and the team of huskies skidded to a halt, their breath pluming in the frosty air. He hopped off the sled with easy agility and strode towards Jake, a wide, welcoming smile lighting up his face. "Jake, you old dog, look at you! It's been ages, hasn't it?" Dustin's booming voice echoed across the snowy expanse, his breath misting in the frigid air. He clapped Jake heartily on the shoulder, a wide, genuine smile splitting his bearded face. "Honestly, until I actually saw you, I wasn't sure you'd really show. But you always were a man of your word. Dustin Bailey, Jake's former college roommate," he said, turning towards Serenity and extending a gloved hand, which he quickly shed. "It's lovely to meet you, Dustin," Serenity replied, shaking her hand, her own gloved hand feeling small in his large calloused one. Then she gestured towards the dog sled team, her eyebrows raised in playful inquiry. "So, is this our chariot?" Dustin turned back to his team of huskies, a proud grin spreading across his face. "These beauties? Nah,
This was just a friendly wager between me and the snowmobile guys. Who's faster, my beauties or their machines? It looks like I won this round." He threw back his head and roared with laughter, the sound echoing through the silent woods. "Listen, you can hear their engines whining now. They're on their way. Poor slowpokes. Probably still half asleep."
Soon enough, the low hum of engines grew louder, and 2 snowmobiles pulled up beside Dustin and his patiently waiting dog-sled team. The Huskies, seasoned travellers, didn't even flick an ear at the noisy machines, content to rest in the snow. Dustin introduced his companions to the newly arrived couple. "This is Caleb," he said, gesturing to a man with a thick mane of dark red hair, a friendly smile. "And this is Wade. We all run Nomad's Paradise together." He then gestured towards the sled. "All right, let's load your gear onto the dogs. And you 2 can hop on the snowmobiles. Serenity, would you mind if Caleb gives you a ride?" Caleb chuckled, nodding towards Serenity's own red curls peeking out from under her hat.
"Looks like we have something in common, wouldn't you say?"
"Well, well," Wade, the second snowmobile driver, grinned, a playful glint in his eyes.
"Why was he given this honourable mission?" "Because you drive like you're on the highway. How could I possibly entrust such a beautiful woman to your crazy head?"
Serenity couldn't help but smile at their easy banter. Swathed in layers of winter gear, her face mostly hidden by her scarf, it was debatable how easily her beauty was discernible, but the compliment nonetheless was a pleasant warmth against the cold air. Once their bags were securely fastened to the dog sled and everyone was situated on the snowmobiles, Dustin clapped his hands together.
"Forward ho! Let's conquer these snowy wilds!"
He gave a sharp command to the Huskies, who were already quivering with anticipation, and the small procession plunged into the dense, dark woods, their way illuminated only by the snowmobile headlights and the powerful beam of Dustin's headlamp. The large, rustic log cabin appeared as suddenly as the towering trees had sprung up beside them. Serenity squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, a thrilling mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through her, and when she opened them again, they were gliding across a snow-covered clearing, on the frozen expanse of a lake.
"Well, here we are,"
Dustin announced, bringing the dog sled to a halt as the snowmobiles idled beside them, their engines quieting.
"Let me flip on the lights."
He strode over to a small shed near a pole and flicked a switch. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating a picturesque clearing dotted with several small bungalows arranged in a semicircle around the main lodge.
"Behold our humble abode,"
Dustin declared proudly, gesturing expansively.
"Nomad's Paradise. Because everyone who finds their way here will meet, well, paradise."
He winked. Paradise, a bit cliché maybe, Serenity thought, but aloud, not wanting to offend their hospitable hosts, she said, "It's beautiful and meaningful."
"Exactly,"
Dustin beamed.
"Though we went through a million different names before we finally agreed. You wouldn't believe some of the crazy ideas we had. Blizzard Inn, Wind Rose Retreat, Forest Edge. We nixed the first 2 because we didn't want our guests thinking it was constantly stormy here, and Forest Edge just felt a little too ordinary."
He chuckled and gestured towards one of the cosy-looking bungalows.
"Here's your cabin. Make yourselves at home. Later I'll tell you all about the area and our plans. And yours, for your stay."
The place turned out to be a surprisingly enchanting place. Before arriving, Serenity hadn't imagined the wealth of interesting experiences a snowy forest could offer. She thoroughly enjoyed snowshoeing through the drifts and between the towering evergreens with Wade, the crunch of the snow beneath their feet, a peaceful rhythm. Dog sledding with Dustin was an exhilarating adventure, the husky's powerful strides and eager barks filling her with a sense of joyful freedom. Afterwards, she'd spend time in the kennel, cuddling the friendly dogs and rewarding them with treats, much to Dustin's mock exasperation about her spoiling them, though his eyes always held a warm amusement. However, Caleb became Serenity's primary partner in exploration. Perhaps it was the unspoken connection of their shared fiery hair, or maybe it was his quiet gratitude for her choosing to ride with him from the station instead of Wade. In the following days, it was invariably his snowmobile she hopped onto for excursions across the frozen lake, or rides through sun-dappled forest clearings. Caleb would take Serenity with him on early morning ice fishing trips, the silence of the frozen landscape broken only by the rhythmic drilling and their hushed conversations. He even managed to find her a pair of ice skates somewhere, her eyes having lit up at the sight of the lake's mirror-like surface, suddenly filled with a childlike longing to glide across it. Caleb was genuinely interested in Serenity's work, eager to hear her professional advice on how to better promote their resort, listening intently to her suggestions. "We don't have the kind of budget to hire an advertising agency," Caleb explained, spreading his hands in a gesture of practicality. "We're barely breaking even as it is. What keeps us going is our own love for this place." "I'm overjoyed I had the chance to speak with you," he added sincerely. "Maybe now more people will discover us." "Of course they will," Serenity encouraged him. "You just need to make a few engaging posts on social media. Ask your friends to write reviews. Word of mouth will spread like wildfire. You'll be making reservations 6 months in advance before you know it."
"And then our paradise will need more cabins, more dogs, and more snowmobiles,"
Caleb mused, sharing his aspirations.
"Actually, first on the list is probably upgrading our ATVs. The new cabins can wait, honestly. I'm not sure I even want them. I like keeping this place a cosy, intimate, not some sprawling, all-inclusive hotel."
"Well, you're only missing one tiny detail to become an all-inclusive hotel," Serenity laughed. "A warm ocean, sandy beaches, and 9 months of summer a year."
"Exactly," Caleb grinned. "For all that, they can head south. We've got the rugged north and real adventures right here."
Serenity looked around at the meticulously maintained cabins, the well-kept grounds, the way the guys interacted with their dogs. A deep sense of care permeated the entire place. She understood instinctively that Dustin, Wade, and Caleb had poured more than just money into this resort. They had invested their very souls. She silently wished them all the luck in the world. Aside from exploring the snowy wilderness and connecting with nature, Serenity and Jake had also planned a visit to the nearest town. They rode past old wooden barracks dating back to the early 20th century, 2-story structures without indoor plumbing, interspersed with more modern, albeit utilitarian buildings. Then Dustin led them to a couple of small general stores reminiscent of a bygone era, and a tiny souvenir shop offering only basic magnets and mugs. While Serenity and Jake explored, Dustin and Caleb stocked up on supplies at one of the stores. The ride back to the resort was slower, the 2 snowmobiles and the dog sled heavily laden with groceries and provisions. A day later, Dustin and Jake announced they needed to go back to town.
"We forgot a few things,"
Dustin said, looking slightly sheepish.
"Forgive me, I'm stealing your Jake for a bit, but I'm leaving you with 2 strong men in exchange."
He winked at Caleb and Wade.
"Don't worry, you still have a whole day tomorrow to say goodbye to our little slice of paradise."
That afternoon, Caleb took Serenity ice skating on the frozen lake. The crisp air, the vast expanse of white, the smooth glide of the blades. It was pure magic. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, the temperature dropped sharply, plummeting 10 degrees in just a few hours. Returning to the resort, the cold biting at their cheeks, Serenity decided to surprise everyone by cooking a delicious dinner as a thank you for their incredible hospitality. Dustin and Jake returned after dark, their figures silhouetted against the snowy landscape as they unloaded their purchases. When they finally stepped inside the main lodge, Serenity's breath caught in her throat. In Jake's hands, he held a large bouquet of slightly frost-kissed red roses.
"I'm sorry," he said, extending the flowers to her. "I tried to keep them warm, but it got cold so fast."
"Oh, Jake," Serenity whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. A radiant smile spread across her face, transforming the weariness from the day into pure joy. Where on earth did he even find roses up here? She wondered.
But that's not all,"
Jake said, his voice a little shaky with nerves. He knelt down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. All three men, Dustin, Wade, and Caleb, who had become witnesses to this unexpected scene, froze, their eyes wide with anticipation. Serenity stared at Jake, completely stunned, the world around them fading away.
"Serenity," he repeated, his voice gentle, his eyes searching hers. "Will you marry me?"
Serenity blinked, as if awakening from a dream, and slowly reached out to take the box from his outstretched hand. She looked from Jake to Caleb, a shy, almost apologetic smile touching her lips, then carefully lifted the ring from its velvet cushion and slipped it onto her finger. "Yes," she whispered, the single word filled with a lifetime of promise. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air before the three men erupted in a chorus of cheers and applause.
"All right, that calls for a celebration,"
Dustin declared, rubbing his hands together with glee. He retrieved a bottle of champagne from the refrigerator. Wade was instantly on hand with glasses, and, with a resounding pop, he poured the sparkling wine for everyone. 3 months passed. Serenity was immersed in her work with Preston. Her boss walked past her desk.
"Serenity, could you come into my office for a minute? I need to talk to you."
Here we go, Serenity thought, a familiar sense of trepidation settling in her stomach. But there was nothing to be done. She finished typing an email to a vendor, clicked send, and rose from her chair, heading towards Preston's office, a mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling within her. 2 months prior, Serenity had meticulously secured her vacation time for the wedding. It had involved a minor battle of wills with Preston, her usually agreeable boss.
"Serenity, honey, could you possibly reschedule?"
He had pleaded, his brow furrowed with concern.
"June is our absolute peak season. Come October, when things quiet down, take all the time you need."
"So, Preston, are you suggesting I have my wedding when it's gloomy and miserable outside? And there's a good chance of a hard frost? Am I understanding you correctly?" Serenity had countered, her voice laced with a hint of incredulity.
"But think of the cheer you'll bring to everyone with your celebration,"
Preston had argued, ever the pragmatist.
"Psychologists say November is the most depressing month. Short days, awful weather, grumpy people. You'll be a ray of sunshine."
"You know, my primary goal is to bring myself joy," Serenity had stated firmly. "I understand your benefits, and for the past few years I've been right there helping you do it. But this time, I'm afraid the answer is no." She had continued, her voice softening slightly but her resolve unwavering. "I want my wedding to be during a warm time of year, so that everyone can come and celebrate, not just indoors but outside too, without being bundled up in layers. And besides, I'm not asking for a whole honeymoon, Just 20 days. I'll come back and dive right back into work. Preston, recognising the unyielding determination in his usually compliant employee, had sighed dramatically and conceded. And now, to Serenity's unpleasant surprise, her boss had something on his mind.
Come in.
Preston gestured, a somewhat strained smile on his face.
Remember our little chat a while back about digital advertising? You were so persuasive about how much more visible it is and how consumers actually pay attention. So, I was contacted by a firm from out of state, wants to break into our market with their digital displays, but they need an immediate placement contract. They're offering a significant discount to get their foot in the door.
He steepled his fingers, his expression turning shrewd.
You know how it is with new partners. We need to vet them, see their operation, check out their installations in person. So I'm sending you on a business trip. You're our expert on this. Go, evaluate, and tell me if we should sign the deal.
Preston, Serenity began, her voice rising in disbelief. A business trip? My wedding is next Friday.
So? You're going to let that interrupt your work for a whole week beforehand? How long have you been planning this thing? 3 months? 4? What difference will the last 10 days make? You have your dress, right?
Yes, but...
And what else do you need? Let Jake handle any last-minute hiccups. Think of it this way. You'll not only be checking out a potential new partner, but also testing your Jake's readiness to be a supportive husband. Go on, get packing.
He consulted his calendar.
You'll fly out tomorrow, be back by Wednesday. Write up your report on Thursday. Friday is all yours. Celebrate, party, relax.
Serenity felt a surge of frustration towards her boss, but she also knew there was no arguing with him when he had his mind set on something. Defeated, she returned home.
Serenity, honey, you look like you've been dragged through a hedge backwards,
Jake said, surprised by her gloomy demeanour. Boss wants me to go on a business trip to check out some digital billboard company. Leaving tomorrow, won't be back until Wednesday. So much for a leisurely Thursday, wrapping things up at work before the big day. Now I'll have to write a report too.
To check out digital billboards? In another state?
Jake frowned, then his expression brightened.
Hey, that's great. I don't understand why you're upset. Go, get a little break from all this wedding madness. Honestly, I thought you were about ready to elope, just to be done with it.
It was true. Serenity was striving for perfection with the wedding arrangements, but every step of the way seemed to present new obstacles. She tackled them all, but not without frequent, exasperated updates to Jake. Honestly, maybe we should have just gone to the registry office and told everyone later, she'd lamented more than once. I'm completely worn out.
Everything will be perfect, don't worry,
Jake had always reassured her, pulling her into a comforting embrace.
I promise nothing will go wrong. It'll all go off easily.
He had held her close, showering her with kisses, and in those moments Serenity had found solace in the thought that she had the most wonderful and understanding fiancé in the world. At the arrivals gate, Serenity spotted a sign bearing her name and approached the man holding it. There was something vaguely familiar about him. Hello, that's me.
Oh, what a coincidence,
the man said, his eyes searching her face intently.
Don't you remember me? It's me, the one who backed into your car.
Recognition dawned on Serenity. This was indeed the man responsible for that minor fender bender. Well, I certainly didn't expect our paths to cross again, she said, a wry smile playing on her lips.
Me neither,
Geoffrey replied, a sheepish grin spreading across his face.
Fate, I guess, he chuckled. Maybe it wasn't so bad she brought us together, literally speaking.
He caught himself.
Sorry, I'm rambling. Shall we head to the hotel?
The next days, Serenity worked very intently. She assessed the working digital billboards, engaged in endless negotiations with production managers, department heads, and the company's CEO. Even the weekend, which fell during her business trip, was spent working, despite their offers of sightseeing tours. "Maybe next time," she had politely declined. "I'm swamped right now." In those 5 intense days, Serenity managed to accomplish a week's worth of work, and she changed her flight home to 2 days earlier than scheduled, thrilled at the prospect of having more time before the wedding. "When Preston told us he was sending you to evaluate our capabilities, I was sceptical that you'd be able to grasp everything in such a short time frame," the CEO of the prospective partner company said. "When Preston told us he was sending you to evaluate our capabilities, I was sceptical that you'd be able to grasp everything in such a short time frame," the CEO of the prospective partner company said, shaking her hand warmly at their farewell. "I'm pleased to admit I was wrong. Your company is fortunate to have such a dedicated employee. If things ever don't work out for you there, I'd be happy to offer you a position." "Thank you," Serenity smiled at him, genuinely pleased with how the trip had gone. She boarded her flight home, a sense of accomplishment buoying her spirits.
"Yeah, Dustin."
Jake's voice was tight with anger, barely above a whisper.
"What do you mean you're not coming? Are you out of your mind? You dragged me into this whole thing and now you're backing out. If it weren't for you, I would have broken up with her ages ago."
There was a pause, then Jake continued, his voice laced with bitter sarcasm.
"Who was it who kept saying, 'She's a good girl, don't let her go'? Me, the idiot. I listened to you. Yeah, I'm not saying she's not good."
Another pause.
"Dustin, I see girls like her at the club every day. Younger, better figures, more interesting. Who the hell talked me into buying the flowers and the ring? You won't find anyone better. Just marry her already. That was you, wasn't it?"
His voice dropped, tinged with confusion and hurt.
"The wedding's at the end of the week, and the more I think about it, the more I wonder if I even want it."
A sigh escaped his lips.
"Yeah, I remember what a great time we had at your place, and I'm not saying she's not a cool girl, but marrying someone is a different ballgame."
His tone hardened again.
"If it weren't for you, I'd be a free man right now. I would have told her right after we got back from your place that we weren't a match, and that would have been it. And now you're refusing to even come to the wedding."
Desperation crept into his voice.
"How am I supposed to tell her? I don't love you. Let's call off the wedding. 2 days before? No way. I'd rather just get divorced later. Anyway, Dustin, I'm waiting for you here. I'll introduce you to some wonderful girls. The ones who come to our club are hotter than runway models. Seriously, you can pick one out. Take her back to your little paradise. It'll be great."
This wasn't how Serenity had imagined her homecoming. She'd pictured opening the apartment door, tiptoeing to where Jake would still be sleeping, his surprised and sleepy greeting. Then they would share stories of their week apart, the final details before their wedding in 2 days. She hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but it happened. After his last words, she slipped the engagement ring off her finger and placed it on the shelf beside the keys, then quietly closed the apartment door from the outside and pressed the button for the elevator. Downstairs, she placed her suitcase in the trunk of her car and turned the ignition. Serenity was devastated. She had genuinely believed that she and Jake were a harmonious couple, and marriage was the natural progression of their relationship. But what struck her most was not the revelation itself. It was her own unsettling calm, as if her world hadn't crumbled just an hour and a half ago, as if the man she trusted hadn't betrayed her, as if nothing had happened at all. Back in her own apartment, Serenity brewed a cup of coffee, stepped out onto her balcony and watched the slow drift of white clouds across the vast summer sky through the glass. Why did he do it? Why agree to marry me if he wasn't sure? But then another thought surfaced, a small seed of relief. Maybe it's better I found out now, before the wedding. If I'm this calm, maybe it's for the best. Maybe that wedding would have been a mistake. A wave of the inevitable washed over her. I probably should talk to Jake. No, not now, I'm not ready. The next day, Serenity handed Preston her trip report, along with a letter of resignation, effective after her planned wedding leave.
"Oh, what am I going to do with you women?" he sighed, shaking his head with mock exasperation. "This is because I sent you on that trip, isn't it? You're mad at me."
No, Preston, Serenity said quietly, meeting his gaze. Circumstances have changed. I'm leaving.
Leaving? Getting married and abandoning everything you've built here over the years? Aren't you even a little bit sorry?
No.
I take it there's no point in trying to convince you to stay?
Absolutely not, Serenity replied, her voice firm. I'm starting a new life.
Well, maybe don't rush into anything. I can wait. How long do you need? A month, 2?
Preston, Serenity said gently, I'm relocating. I won't be able to work for you any more. Please, don't be upset.
It's a shame, but on the other hand, who am I to stand in the way of your happiness?
With a flourish, he signed her resignation letter. Serenity was sitting in the airport waiting area, her flight about to board when her phone rang.
"Sweetheart,"
flashed across the screen. She answered, looked at Jake's picture for a moment, then swiped, putting the phone in airplane mode. Just then, her flight was called. She picked up her suitcase and headed towards the gate. 4 months passed. Serenity sat in the office of the very company her former boss had sent her to check out. Now she was a part of the team, head of the advertising department there. Serenity, there's a client here to see you. It was Emma, the receptionist. Yes, I'm expecting him. Please send him in. The door opened and a man stepped into the office.
"Good morning."
Something familiar made Serenity lift her gaze from the laptop screen, where she was reviewing the latest data her boss had sent her overnight. The man froze in the doorway.
"Serenity!"
Serenity took a steadying breath.
"Hello, Dustin."
I wasn't expecting to see you here.
"Well, the surprise is mutual. What are you doing here?"
Working, as you can imagine.
"I see that, but I don't understand. Or maybe I just don't want to believe it. Care to explain what's going on?"
Look, Serenity said, her tone businesslike. Why don't we just talk about work? If you insist, we can talk after work, and not here. Dustin approached the desk, his eyes never leaving hers. He pulled some printouts and a flash drive from his briefcase and placed them on the desk.
"I was planning to discuss what exactly needs to be on the layout."
He tapped the flash drive.
"Here are some photos of the Nomad's Paradise. I think there's plenty to choose from."
A few hours later, they both met at a nearby bar.
"I know that sometimes grooms don't show up for weddings,"
Dustin remarked, leaning back in his chair.
"But a bride, that's something I've only ever seen in movies. Anyway, I have so much to tell you. Jake completely lost it. Called me, yelling that it was all my fault. Sadly, he'd thrown away all that money, and there wouldn't be a wedding."
He shook his head.
He was worried about saving face. He thought he'd be a laughingstock at work. He was under so much stress. I was actually afraid he'd do something drastic. But thankfully nothing too crazy happened. I had to drop everything and come down to support him. After all, he listened to me. It was me who—"
"Don't," Serenity interrupted gently. "I know all the story."
"How do you know?"
Dustin asked, his curiosity piqued. Serenity took a sip of her beer and briefly recounted her unexpected return from the business trip.
"So that's what happened,"
Dustin said, a look of chagrin washing over his face.
"Looks like I messed things up there too. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, I guess. You two seemed like such a perfect couple."
"It's all right, Dustin. Water under the bridge," Serenity said with a small smile. "Everything happens for a reason. Tell me, how's the resort? How are Wade and Caleb doing?"
"Everything's good, really. Wade got married and only pops by the resort occasionally now. And Caleb's the manager."
"Wait a minute. If he's the manager, what are you?" Dustin puffed out his chest playfully, then laughed.
"Actually, we had a long debate about who would handle the advertising, supplies and tour groups, and who would be in charge of the day-to-day operations at the place. We couldn't agree, so we just drew straws. He drew the short one and got to stay in the woods. And now I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to do everything."
"And Caleb hasn't gotten married?" Serenity asked with a smile, remembering the cheerful, red-haired friend from their winter adventures.
"No, I think he's got a special someone, but he's not talking about it."
Dustin paused.
"Oh, and by the way, thanks to your advice, we launched that targeted social media campaign, and like you said, word of mouth is really working now. But tell me, how are you? How's life treating you here? New city, new job. But what about everything else?"
"Same old," Serenity replied casually.
"Come on. I'll never believe that no guy has tried to sweep you off your feet."
"Dustin, it's not just about them. It's about me, too."
"Are you still in love with Jake? Why, then, would you have run off?"
"Yes, but not with Jake."
"What a relief. Besides, he's got a new girlfriend now, a new instructor at his gym, even asked for advice on how to propose. But after that last time, I'm no longer the go-to guy for relationship advice. I just asked him to figure it out himself, so he couldn't blame me later."
After meeting Dustin, Serenity couldn't fall asleep for a long time, and when she finally did, she had a wonderful dream. She dreamed of sparkling snow, the frozen expanse of a lake, and the white skates that glided across the ice, tracing elegant curves. Serenity didn't dare attempt any jumps, having been away from the ice for so long, but even simple steps drew applause from the lone figure sitting on a snowmobile by the edge of the lake. And then, after all the practiced elements, as Serenity decided she had had enough and skated towards the shore, there was an awkward movement, or perhaps something caught under her blade. She fell, her head hitting the ice with a sharp crack, and everything went black. The next sensation she registered was being held in strong arms.
"Serenity? My dear Serenity, are you all right?"
A voice whispered urgently close to her face. Suddenly, Serenity felt a strange desire to pretend she hadn't regained consciousness. And then Caleb kissed her.
"My love, please wake up. Please be all right."
Serenity finally opened her eyes, her hand instinctively going to her lips, trying to grasp the fading remnants of a dream. When it slipped away, she stared up at the ceiling, trying to revive memories she had once tried to bury forever. That incident opened Serenity's eyes to her genuine feelings for Caleb. They had looked into each other's eyes for a long, silent moment.
"I won't let you go back to him,"
Caleb had whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "I'm not going anywhere," she had promised, her voice thick with emotion. and together they had returned to the resort, quieted by the revelation that had passed between them. But then came Jake's proposal, her acceptance, and the heartbroken, tear-filled eyes of her beloved Caleb, who had instantly lost all his usual light-heartedness. Even his fiery red hair seemed to have dulled with grief. Serenity had tried to erase that episode from her mind, convincing herself that a chance encounter couldn't be fate, and that Jake was a reliable and loyal partner. It wasn't until she returned from her business trip and overheard her fiancé's callous phone conversation that she suddenly understood. It was retribution. Retribution for her betrayal of the most wonderful and sunny person, for her rejection of true love, and for her own cowardice. She had moved to the new city, taking a job at the new company, and tried to forget everything, starting anew. But fate, it seemed, was not so easily evaded. Serenity realized this when Dustin appeared in the doorway of her office. She tried to mask her interest when she asked about Caleb, but Dustin's reply filled her with a quiet joy. She wanted to rush to her beloved, but she held herself back. "You betrayed him. What makes you think he'll forgive you?" She needed a reason, a legitimate excuse, to see her red-haired destiny again. "Geoffrey," she said to her new boss, "my colleague and I have concluded that a site visit is necessary. We need high-quality photographs, not only of the Nomads Resort itself, but also of the surrounding area. You understand that tourists come for more than just sitting in cabins, right?" "No problem at all, Serenity," he replied enthusiastically. "You can go there and get all the material you need on your own." Caleb, making his rounds of the resort as he did a couple of times a day, stepped into an empty cabin. He would have gladly offered it to guests, but Dustin had told him to hold the bungalow for the advertising people who had promised to arrive a week ago. Caleb grumbled under his breath. "What a mess! Why can't they plan their time? Are they going to drag this out until New Year's?" "Hey, take it easy," Dustin said, trying to calm him down. "We need good advertising, so let's be patient. And then we'll make up for any lost business when the tourists flood in, thanks to them." Caleb knew he was right, but he was still frustrated. But finally the day arrived when Dustin went to the train station to meet the representative from the advertising company. The sound of a snowmobile echoed from the woods. Caleb turned and saw Dustin expertly navigating the packed snow. He hurried back to the main lodge to greet the guest. "Here she is," Dustin exclaimed, hopping off the snowmobile and helping a woman with a small backpack dismount. "I don't think introductions are necessary." Caleb stepped forward to greet the guest and froze. Looking back at him, a slightly shy smile on her face was Serenity. The pale blue sky, dotted with wispy clouds, was reflected in the cold, clear water of the lake. Sunlight danced on the gentle waves, and dragonflies flitted among the tall reeds along the shore. The brief northern summer was drawing to a close. Serenity sat on a blanket spread on the grass, her hand gently restraining a toddler who was determined to crawl further afield. "Caleb, there you are." Dustin emerged from the woods and walked towards them. "Decided to catch the last moments of summer?" Serenity smiled. Dustin reached the blanket, bent down, scooped up the child, tossed him playfully in the air, and caught him. The little boy giggled with delight. "Well, want a ride on Uncle Dustin's shoulders?" He settled the child on his neck and looked at Serenity. "Caleb asked me to tell you that he's calling his sunny family to the table. Dinner is ready. And for some little people, there's even homemade mashed apples." "Well, if the resort manager is inviting us, I'm afraid we can't refuse," Serenity said, rising from the blanket, gathering their things and following Dustin, her son perched happily on his shoulders. The little boy laughed, his red, curly hair catching the breeze.